Welcome to No More Carbon Copies. It's the podcast for high-performing leaders with big goals who feel stuck trying to reach the next level. At Vivera Leadership, we believe no two leaders are the same. The best leaders perform at their highest when they understand what makes them unique and stop trying to lead like someone else. This is where we explore how to see ourselves clearly, address self-sabotage, and lead with clarity, confidence, and purpose. You don't need to be a copy, you just need to be you. Welcome to No More Carbon Copies.
Hi, Megan. Thank you for joining me today. Welcome.
Thanks, Roger. It's great to be here.
Excited to have this conversation with you. We talk about a couple things here on the podcast, but most of what we're talking about is that there's two things that keep leaders kind of stuck at their current level, not knowing what makes them uniquely effective and not knowing how they sabotage their own effectiveness. So we believe that the consequences of that are that leaders kind of top out prematurely and stop developing, or they don't perform at a level they could perform at because of those two things. And so you and I have known each other for, I'm guessing, 10 years, 9 years. So Megan, you were the first person we hired into the MBA rotation program at Experian when you were coming out of Vanderbilt. And then following your time at Experian, you've moved into another organization, and we've had the privilege of working together again. So long time we've known each other. Tell us a little about what your role is now and where you're at.
Yeah, so I lead the revenue cycle management product teams over at Kibu Health. So in charge of just the general strategy, direction, and really elevating that solution set.
Beautiful. And a Vanderbilt grad, undergrad, and graduate school, correct? And then I think it's what's really interesting is one little tidbit fun fact about you is that you did some interesting stuff before you went to get your MBA. Just real quick, I think people would love to hear this. So what did you do before you got your MBA?
Yeah, so I was originally a counselor. I went straight through undergrad, did a master's in education and human development counseling, did drug and alcohol counseling before moving into the school system, was in the schools for 4 years before deciding I wanted to do a career shift, and then ultimately went back, got me an MBA at Vanderbilt, and that's kind of when our paths intersected for the first time.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the most, I think, things I was most impressed with about you is that your breadth of experience, knowledge, education, and the way that you come at leadership is very different because of that experience of being in both of those kind of counseling settings, both drug and alcohol and in schools. I think your passion, your kind of the way you approach people and leadership in general, always been impressed with that. And side note, always been pretty impressed with people who have some really interesting work experience before they go and get their MBA and then come out. So kudos to you. So let's have a conversation about feedback. Interested in what has been your experience with feedback in the different organizations you've worked with? Because you've worked with a good variety of organizations. Love to hear what your experience has been over the years.
Yeah, so it's a great question. And I think if I go back to middle school, actually, I had a teacher that every single day for social studies, he'd write a quote on the board that you had to copy in your notebook about like improvement and how to be better. And so I think kind of naturally being a high achiever and then having this mindset of, okay, I can always do better. I can always be better. I think I've naturally always sought out feedback. And especially as an individual contributor, if you're a high performer and you do work and you take on extra tasks, people generally say, oh, you're doing a great job, or just keep doing what you're doing. And that's something that I noticed in the school systems, in internship opportunity, as well as in business school. And then even, coming out at Experian or, even at Kibu, there's parts where people are just like, they're praising what's good or what they like. What I've really struggled with is getting some of that harder feedback of how can I actually improve and get better? Like, what do I need to be doing differently to elevate myself, thereby elevating my teams and the organization as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's super interesting, because what you're pointing to is this idea that kind of higher level achievers, people are just so grateful to have them that they don't provide anything really specific, and so they kind of feel like I'm doing well, but they kind of leave some stuff on the table in terms of not being able to really talk about how do we provide additional, more concrete information to help you go like, hey, you do this really well. You could be even better. You can be even sharper. You can, and there's a little bit of like, well, you don't necessarily get that those specifics because people are just happy that you're there.
Yes, I think that. And then also read Radical Candor by Kim Scott. And one of her things is around ruinous empathy. And a lot of times, people feel bad or they feel guilty for giving the negative feedback, or if it's an uncomfortable situation. And if you haven't been coached or taught how to do that, it's not a skill set that I think a lot of people naturally have.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting. Like coached or taught. What's your experience? Where do you think people get that coaching, that teaching, that kind of, I guess, preparation to actually provide that useful feedback? In your experience, where does that come from?
Either mentors or, obviously I've worked with you in executive coaching capacity and as a boss. And I think you are someone who can provide that kind of detailed information or help facilitate getting that information from others, through a 360 process that otherwise I personally wouldn't have had access to.
Yeah. So very curious because I have this, I have some thoughts on this, but I'm wondering what your thoughts on there. What allows you to trust feedback, or what causes you to distrust feedback?
So I trust feedback more if it's coming from someone that I know has my best interests, like at heart or at play. I trust it more if I value the person or the leader. I tend to distrust feedback when it's coming from someone who maybe I'm like, well, I'm not sure if I necessarily, it's not that I don't value the person or the individual, but I'm like, if you're not like being successful, or if you're giving feedback that's more like, hey, I'm either throwing you under the bus or I'm trying to elevate myself in the process, I guess more just disingenuous.
Yeah, disingenuous. Yeah. Do you have some experiences, and you don't have to kind of name names or organizations, but like what are some of the, like, so I got some experience throughout my career, and obviously I'm a little older than you, but I've had some experiences in my career where I've gotten, oh, hey, we're going to give you a 360. Yeah, or you sit down with your boss and your boss is like, hey, I've got some feedback in an annual review. And for me, I remember feeling like for my boss, who didn't really see me in action, yet sitting there giving me some very generic feedback, mostly about did the business hit the results, not how I led. And then getting some 360 feedback where I got some comments that were totally out of context. And so they may have been true, they may have been right, but I didn't understand the context. And so it was less helpful. Do you have any experiences like that? Have you kind of had some of that as well?
Yeah, so I have two different experiences to talk about, and one I think really gets at my original answer. So I was in a school system, and the school counselors were in charge of state testing. I had teachers report that my principal was cheating on the state testing, and so I reported it, and she found out I reported it, and we had to do annual evaluations every year. And to make a long story very short, she evaluated me on a session that she never attended. And so that was a whole thing and experience. And I wasn't going to trust anything that she told me because the whole basis of the evaluation was on false pretenses. So that's that extreme example. Yeah.
Yeah, but some retribution. That's interesting. Yeah. That's hard.
But on the flip side, I've done two different 360 experiences. One was kind of a more standardized questions where you basically send out a survey to a bunch of different people. So people who are above you in the organization, at your level, people who report to you, and then just other individuals as well. And I also had to evaluate myself on that 360. And I think there was value in kind of seeing how I related myself compared to others. But at the same time, that data wasn't as helpful, just receiving that data, because there wasn't necessarily context for it. And so I had to have a ton of follow-up conversations to really make meaning out of it. So some people answered the survey for based on how I'm performing in my current role. Some people answered the survey based on how they think I would perform if I was at the next level in the organization. And so I had to go in and do a lot of work to make sense of it. I also did a 360 with you, which was a very different experience. I essentially gave you a list of people that I wanted you to interview. So they were people who I trusted. They were also people that I knew had seen me at my best and probably at my worst, and who were willing to take, a hour block of their time to share their experiences of me and my work with you. And so that was like fundamentally different. I think one, because you interviewed them so you could capture their stories and dig deeper into the feedback. And then you could start to track themes. And then you synthesize that information like very easily for me. So it wasn't necessarily that I was having to go do a lot of follow-up work to make the connections myself. I could take what you gave me and then come up with an action plan.
Yeah. Appreciate that. I think that I've had that similar experience, and the reason I created the process that you went through, that we went through together, which, by the way, not rocket science, right? I think I'm not the only one that necessarily goes and interviews people. I think that there's some uniqueness about the way that we synthesize it, but those things are pretty interesting. Like the idea of selecting folks who have seen you do work, who have your best interest at heart, and then bringing that information together. I'm curious, for you, as you compare like the different kind of 360s that you've participated in or feedback you've gotten, what was the tangible, like what value did you get from that? What tangible difference does that make for you as you execute leadership, as you make decisions, as you decide how you're going to show up and navigate your career and navigate your situations in the organization?
Yeah, so when we did the 360, it was right after I was promoted from director to VP. And the lens at which, we did the 360 was really in terms of leadership. And as we explored that 360 profile, there was a decision point, right? Like I am a good, like a really good mid manager, and I can execute really well. If I want to be like a great executive, there were things that I was going to have to do in order to step up and fill those like shoes or fill that role. And one of the things that we, I think, actioned pretty early on was like stop taking permission and start doing. And I think that was one of the themes in terms of, influence. It's like, hey, people trust you, people value you, but sometimes you kind of hold back and don't say what you're thinking, or you look to others to take permission versus coming from a place of authority. And it sounds super simple when you say it, and like as I'm saying it out loud now, but it was one of the things that I didn't necessarily realize that I was doing in the moment. I think sometimes I could pick up on it, but having it there and then saying like, oh, okay, in order to really step up, I need to do this. And then, okay, what is the plan to then go in and do that? And I think that led to a lot of conversations around, relaxing into leadership and understanding what was keeping me from showing up in a position of authority or as an expert in the room with the executive leadership team.
Yeah. So that connects really well with the idea that we don't see ourselves accurately. Like I don't see myself accurately. You don't see yourself accurately. I don't think anybody really sees themselves accurately. We see ourselves through a blurry mirror that's got all this mix of voices and confusion for different things. And so, you're someone who, if you don't mind me saying, really high achiever. Everyone views you as like an expert. Like you are one of the most informed, researched person in the room, whatever room you're in. Like you're going to go in prepared. But your perception of yourself is that you didn't have kind of the the chops to actually be in the room, to actually have a voice at the table, not from an arrogant perspective, but more from a humble perspective. I do have a lot to offer here. I'm a gift to this room. Like I'm a gift to the organization. Let's jump in here. And you were kind of sitting back and waiting for permission, waiting to be asked, waiting to be kind of given the platform. And I think that as we progress that throughout different levels in the organization, that was a big shift to go like, oh, no, I actually do have the confidence, because I know that people in the room, people in the organization view me as an expert, as someone who has a lot to offer. I can show up differently. And that's the thing about knowing and having confirmation and clarity on, I do have this kind of unique skill set that I bring to the table. I'm not guessing at what that is. And so I can show up differently.
100%. And for me, it's like, how do you show up differently? And then how do you also communicate effectively when you show?
Yeah. Talk about that.
I would say like one of the other things that came up was, you can read my face pretty well most of the time. People could see when I was getting frustrated. Then when I finally would speak, it was coming from a place of frustration, and potentially my tone was off, or I was highlighting the negative versus reframing what I was thinking to really drive the conversation forward and bring people along with me, which I think is also a huge skill in terms of leadership, like taking others along the journey, understand what you're thinking, how you're getting from point A to point B, and getting buy-in from people around you.
Yeah, I can just see it, like having experienced it with you, is you're 4 or 5 steps ahead, but the rest of the group is a little bit behind. And for you to kind of come back and gently explain reasoning, explain thinking, kind of bring people along, rather than kind of sit on it and come out with like, nope, this is what we should do, and more frustrated. I think that's an interesting skill or thing to transition over, is to go, as we get more experience, as you're a higher level leader, performer, to be able to kind of bring people with you, to be able to understand that not everybody has the same level of information that you have. And so being willing to proactively bring people along, that allows you to have a tone that is much more even, intentional, but rather than frustrated that this conversation is going in a direction that's really not helpful, and so I'm going to explode.
For sure. And I think the other thing that like has also helped with this too is that, you had conversations with people at my company, and they were willing to engage in those conversations, and they were also very transparent with me outside of the work that we did, and said, hey, this is what I told Roger. And it gave me a platform to then, one, for them to go and share the information directly with me, and then for me to go in and check back in with them to see like what works and what's working, what's not working. So one, I continuing to grow. Two, I'm building like stronger relationships with the individuals that you interviewed, and kind of helped propel my brand and name that way. Because one of the things that we talked about was, hey, you're at this tipping point. You have to make a decision of, do you want to be a leader, or do you want to keep going where you are? And so I think some of those conversations also help to signal to others that, no, I'm serious. I want to grow in my role, and I want to lead in this company, and I want to be an expert and someone who can really help drive us to the next level.
Yeah. So if that points to something that's super interesting to me, which is like, it's not that the people that you worked with didn't know what they were going to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
It's that they didn't tell you. And I find that it always happens. I'm sure that everybody in my life has thoughts about me, but they're not telling me.
Right.
They're not proactively coming up and giving that. And so there is a sense of like, you gave people permission. You gave people this kind of sense of, I'm signaling to people, I want, I'm here for your input. And then they gave it. They gave it to me. They gave it to you. And all of a sudden you have this fuel. Here's what I'm really great at, which I'm sure you could list off, like, which would be fun for you to list off. Like, here's what you're really good at. But then also, not your weaknesses, but here's how you sabotage those strengths.
Yes.
Like, I don't really care about weaknesses as much, but like the sabotage of your strengths is interesting to me. So I think those two concepts is like, people aren't going to tell you proactively. At least I find that's the case. It's the rare person that's going to come up and kind of give you unsolicited feedback that's really helpful. And two, usually the feedback is focused on weaknesses, not necessarily focused on like, man, here's what you're really good at. And
Right.
we really need that. We need more of that. We need more of you doing those type of things. I'd love to hear your thoughts on those two things.
So one, yes, I think the big thing for me is, hey, this is what's sabotaging what you're really great at and how you're decreasing your brand within the organization. And sometimes it might be something so trivial that you didn't even realize that you were doing. And so being able to, like, there's certain things that you can like correctly fix, change, and it just makes a world of difference. And then there are other things you're like, yeah, weakness is like more about like things that I can improve. I think part of it too was recognizing there are going to be some things that like it's never going to be my strength. Like I can go in and create a base financial model and do some analysis, but I am never going to be a master like finance individual. I am not going to be a CFO. And so that's work that I will potentially outsource to someone else to do or to get help with. And I think, as someone who wants to always do better or be better, I think one of the things that you said to me on my very first review at Experian, circa 2017, 2018, was like, don't look at the weaknesses or the opportunities. I think they were. You're like, read what you're good at. And that was very hard for me because I'm like, all right, what's wrong with me? Not what's right with me. And just focusing in on, okay, you're really good at this. You have a skill. Embrace this, own this, be this, and continue to drive that forward and be proud of it.
Like working with high achievers, working with people, in the program, it's all people who graduate with their MBA, but working with high achieving executives for the last, 20, 30 years. It's super interesting to me how we have this sense of like, we want people to perform at a high level, but we don't want them to be confident. We don't want them to be self-assured in those things because we think it's going to make them arrogant. And so people just pretend like I'm not certain exactly what people like about me. So I try to be good at everything. And I've done the same thing. I've done the exact same thing. And I remember not having this sense of like, what do people really value about me? What do I bring to the table? Like I'm a guy, I'm leading this part of the business at Experian. I'm leading teams, I'm doing this stuff, but not really understanding what do the people like really value who report to me? What do my peers think? What do the people above me think? And so I just try to show up and kind of perform. I'm just going to try to be good at everything. Give everybody this sense of I'm super confident all the time, whatever. And I remember walking into meetings feeling like I am insecure. I don't really know what people value about me. And so I wouldn't talk as much, or I would talk at the wrong times. I just felt so off balance. And merely because of this kind of sense of not really focusing on where I had the highest strengths and being able to talk from that level of I'd say clarity and confidence, not arrogance. Clarity actually gives humble confidence, not the other way around. So I've experienced that. You and I've talked about that, but that is so common. It's so common. I remember talking with several other people in that same program, high achievers, unwilling to go, I'm good at that. Like, I know I'm good at that. And so I'm going to be good at that because that offers value to the company. It offers value to my coworkers. They would kind of go like, nah, I got to be humble. I got to stay back. I got to not own that. You use the word relax. I used to say like, relax into your greatness. Like, you're great, relax into that. You're not great at everything, but the things you are great at, you need to relax and just perform. So I just find that it's very consistent with my experience. I'm glad you mentioned that because it's a very common experience, even for leaders who are high achieving and high performing.
And I think I didn't know that until much later in my career journey. And so then I'm like, okay, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And I think that like fueled some self-doubt versus being able to work through like one, owning what I'm good at, two, realizing I'm not the only one who feels this way. This is normal.
Yeah.
And like, what are you going to do to really move and elevate yourself?
Yeah. And I think one of the things I applaud in you is, and probably started, like you said, back in middle school, as a sense of like, I want to be effective. I want to be better. Now you're highly critical of yourself. You are someone who's never going to be satisfied with your performance. And so, one of the things I always want you to do is go, oh, no, I can add a lot of value without necessarily the self criticism. But I think that is something, that openness to go, hey, I need this. I want this. I'm going to keep going at it. And I think that's contagious. I think it's contagious for you. It's contagious for your team, contagious for the people that work with you to go, oh, Meghan's that kind of person I can have that dialogue with. I can have that conversation with, and I'm not going to feel like I'm always being criticized. Have you seen that with your employees? Have you seen that with your peers?
Yeah. So yes, I want to add to it. It was kind of another aha moment. So I am the way I am and continue to grow and evolve. And so I've had to also separate out what is going to add value. Like if I do something 90% of the way, that's probably way more than I needed to do. There's no value in me like getting to 100. And so kind of understanding that piece. And that's something that, working with some members on my team who are also very similar, they're like, but it's not perfect. It's not all the way there. And it's really having those conversations around like, is that extra effort worth it? Yes or no? And how do you learn to be okay and like even happy and like proud of yourself when you're not meeting some unrealistic expectation? Because at the end of the day, that unrealistic expectation isn't what's going to drive that business forward.
Yeah.
Getting things done well, doing forward momentum and like iterating upon it. And I think some of those conversations have really opened up the opportunity, with either direct reports or other people that I've mentored over time who are like, you understand, you get this. And so hopefully kind of passing down the knowledge. And I think the other piece is the expectations I have for myself and the pace at which I can go and drive. I need to make sure I'm not creating an unsustainable work environment for both my team and my cross-functional peers, because that will then, one of my greatest, or it's the two greatest strengths that work together are really around like influence and just like people engagement. And so if I am not mindful and intentional of my expectations, the unrealistic expectations, I can take away from what I'm.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, the question in my mind I was thinking about is it a once and done kind of thing? Like you've got the feedback, you got this good information, what you're good at, kind of what people value about you, how you sabotage yourself. It sounds to me like that you're similar to me. Like I might know, but I need to be reminded. For some reason that those kind of things come back. The self-doubt comes back, the tendency to try to be good at things that aren't affirmed gifts. And so there's that need to be reminded. There is so much about me. There's this voice in my head that says, oh, that's weak. The fact that you need to be reminded is a weakness. That's for me. But it's true for the people that I work with. Do you find like what's helpful to you, even though you've got the 360, do you need that same level of kind of go back and be reminded?
Yes. So I have the ugliest PowerPoint slide that I think anyone has ever created. And it has like, this is what you're good at. It also has reminders. So bringing back the counseling background, there's like this red, yellow, green exercise. Like green is like things that are happening that signify that you are operating and doing things at your best. Like yellow, things are slightly off track, and like red, they're definitely off track. But this slide has, things that I'm really good at, like things that like, hey, if this is coming up, like you might need to do some introspection and see what's going on in your life that's making you use this behavior. There's other just kind of random feedback that people have given me kind of as an affirmation, reminders. It's like, I need sleep, I need a really good workout, and I need to eat well, just to have like the base foundation to help me operate at my best regardless of what other stressors are going on. So it's all of that in a very ugly format.
So how often do you look at that? Like, what's the...
It depends. So there are times where I look at it, every day before work. And then there are times where, just more in the groove that it might be like once a month.
Yeah, that's good. I love how you created that. Reminds me of someone that we both know who had a similar type of document, but they taped it to the outside of their computers. They carried it with them everywhere. And that's a great reminder. Well, good. So Meghan, what's a current challenge you're dealing with right now that you're like, hey, this is something as a leader I'm trying to attack? Anything that you're willing to put out there?
Yeah, so as we're kind of continuing to grow, we have some opportunities ahead of us that are going to require a lot of work, a lot of cross-functional partnership. And so we're in the SaaS business, developing product, and there's some stuff that typically you have product release processes and launch plans, and in order to meet the opportunity in the market, we're going to be way more startup-ish and expecting a lot of the team. And for me, it's how do I help the team balance kind of the stress and anxiety of the rapid pace in which we're moving, while kind of maintaining work-life balance, while getting everything that we need to do accomplished. And I think for me, I have a tendency to want to jump in, and I need to really make sure that everyone on my team is empowered to do what they need to do, because right now they are the experts. I'm a step removed from it so that they can be successful, and really make sure I'm giving them what they need in the moment.
Good challenge. That's good. Giving them what they need, not jumping in to fix stuff, making sure that people understand the balance of high growth, not necessarily a lot of clarity. Sounds like you guys are kind of moving back into a garage and just kind of like making stuff happen, which is both. I love how you say it's an opportunity.
Yeah, it's a huge opportunity.
That's huge. That's huge. Well, good. Well, Meghan, thanks. I wish you all the best with that. Thanks for having the conversation, for your vulnerability, and jumping in on this podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Roger. Happy to be here.
Thanks for listening to No More Carbon Copies. If today's episode challenged your thinking or sparked a new idea, we'd love for you to share it or leave a review. And if you want to go deeper, take the free Leadership Blind Spots Diagnostic. It's a quick tool that helps you identify the hidden patterns holding you back and gives you practical insight to grow your leadership and your team. Just head to viveroleadership.com/diagnostic or use the QR code on the screen to take it now. We'll see you next time. Until then, lead true.